Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of this week's channel called Patrick the Runner. My name is Patrick Sheridan and as always I'm here to talk about running. So I am doing this week's video on the lactate testing that I got at the weekend, and I know some of you will know that this video is coming, so you'll see that there are some interesting results. Before just going into that, I wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who has been tuning in so far. Please do feel free to leave your questions in the comment section below, but also please do like the videos if you're enjoying them, and please do subscribe if you're enjoying the channel and you haven't already subscribed. So moving on, let's get stuck into this week's video and let's see how I get on Saturday with the lactate testing.
Okay, so hello everyone. I am here at Aspire Fitness Lab, which is where I'm going to get my testing done, my lactate testing today, and it's about 15 minutes away. So what I'm going to do now is just a quick 10-minute warm-up, running about a mile and a half or so, just because I don't want to do anything that's too different than what I usually do. So I want to get a fair idea of what my lactate threshold is, and I think in order to do that I need to be sufficiently warmed up, and I know that the paces are gradually increased on the treadmill, but I think it's important that I make sure I'm warmed up as usual, or at least close to as usual as possible, so that when I get on the treadmill I'm not going to be getting my lactate done and my lactate isn't going to be spiking too early, because sometimes that's what can happen when you're not warmed up properly. So here we go, looking forward.
Just yet. Okay. So I'm going to get you to do a wee bit of a warm-up, okay? So you need to do a wee warm. Whilst you're on that treadmill, I'm going to talk you through it. So what's going to happen is, on this scale here, I'm going to hold this over. So on this scale here, I want you to call out what you perceive as RPE scale. Sure. So this is the Borg scale, original Borg scale. So it starts at 6 and goes to 20. Okay. So every 3 minutes, so we're going to do a 3-minute protocol. So every 3 minutes, I'm going to ask you to step the rails and put your hand over here. Okay. I'm going to take a little bit of blood sample. Okay. I'll record your heart rate, record the speed, and record your RPE. Okay. Okay? And then we plot that on the graph. Sure. Okay. Okay. Now during this test, it is a ramp test. Okay. And whilst it's not a max effort test, it can be quite high. Okay. During the test, if you do feel any discomfort, any pain, particularly any kind of chest pain, sure, let me know, we'll stop the test. No. And we can always do it another day. Okay. Is that okay? That's the most important thing. No. But what we're going to do is every 3 minutes then I'm going to get you step off, take a little bit of blood sample. Sure. So I'll just use one finger, because otherwise you'll have more than one finger. It's going to be sore tomorrow. Yeah, sure. You have one finger sore is better than 2 or 3 fingers. And then I'll reset the speed and get you to go back on again. So it'll be a time that here, it'll be time your actual running time, not the time because when you step off you lose about 30 seconds. Okay. So we're going to continue to do that until we've got at least 6 millimotors. Okay. So 4 millimotors is what we determine as your onset blood lactate accumulation, but we're going to go to 6, and we'll see how we are then. So we'll just make sure we're well past it. Is that okay? Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so I just wanted to make a couple of things clear before going any further. So as you can see there, I'm about to do another bit of a warm-up, and that made sense because the initial warm-up was completed about 20 minutes prior to that. So it made sense for me to do another warm-up to prevent any excessive lactate build-up in the early stages of the testing. And you can hear George saying there that we're going to get up to a certain point, and he mentions that point being 6 millimoles per litre, if you heard him there. And what he's referring to there is 6 millimoles of lactate per litre of blood. So firstly, I would suggest that if you haven't watched my video from last week, I suggest you do that. It's about threshold training, and it explains what type of data I'm looking to get here. But as you know, if you've watched that video, the 2 main paces that I'm looking to get here are my LT1 pace, which is your aerobic threshold pace, and my LT2 pace, which is my anaerobic threshold pace. Now, what's important to understand is that for most people, as an average, their LT1 pace will be at a pace where the blood lactate concentration in their blood is 2 millimoles of lactate per litre of blood. So that's the first reading that we were looking at getting. And the second reading is, of course, the LT2. Now, for most people, that pace is going to mean that the blood lactate concentration is at 4 millimoles of lactate per litre of blood. So that's the two important points that I was looking to get measured the other day. And why George there, the man who's taken the testing, has mentioned 6 millimoles of lactate at the end there is because he wants me to get to a stage where I'm a fair bit above my anaerobic threshold, so that when we look at the graph, we can actually see where the exponential rise is. Because for some people, although those figures that I mentioned there are 2 millimoles and 4 millimoles are an average, for some people that might change, and I'll show you my individual data at the stage at the end of the video here when I'm talking about the results and showing the graphs. But for some people, it might be that their anaerobic threshold means that their blood lactate concentration is 4.3 millimoles. So what you really need at the end of the day is a graph to be able to see where the considerable spike was after the threshold point, so that you actually know what your threshold is. Because, for example, say my lactate was at 4 after 15 kilometers per hour, and then after 16 kilometers per hour it's 4.1, and after 17 it's 4.2. Because that would be a really gradual increase in my lactate, that would mean that that probably wasn't my threshold. So that's why I'm explaining that, and that's why George wanted to get up to 6 so that we could see from the graph where the exponential rise was. I hope that makes sense. Now we're going to get into the video and we can see how I get on. Okay, so you might have heard George talk about RPE there. So basically that stands for rate of perceived exertion, and George told me to tell him that after each 3-minute effort. So I had to say what my rate of perceived exertion was on a scale of 6 to 20, and that's what I did.
Really? So you want to get the results of 2, 4 and 6. Yeah, lactate turns point OBLE, which is 4, and then max as achieved with it.
Yes, okay. Where's like the anaerobic threshold? Sorry, is it?
Anaerobic threshold. Anaerobic threshold is the VO2 max term because it's the max of the oxygen.
Okay.
But it's the same thing. It's the same turn. It's just when your lactate starts to go. And then we'll figure it again. So what I'll do, I'll get you to jump on. We'll just take a wee first screen, and then we'll start the test.
Brilliant. The 0.5 is a lot better because I did treadmill session the other night. Did a tempo run and I put it at 1.
Yes.
And it just seemed very difficult.
Yeah. 0.5. It's all you just set it at. Just to get a wee bit of an incline. Just right up and down. So it just gives you a wee bit of an idea what it might be like, you know. So that's what we do normally set it at.
That's 10 minutes.
That's 10 minutes. Okay. So we'll just stop it now.
Right.
This is the wee torture device, okay? You'll feel a wee scratch, okay? You feel your hands. Your hands are nice and warm. So sometimes at the beginning it can be hard to get the blood out.
Sure.
But hopefully we'll get it once each time, okay? Just get a bit of blood there, and then we'll just take a wee. Okay. That's perfect. Right, okay. Right. So once we do that, okay, if you want to go back on the treadmill now.
Probably 6 or 7.
Okay, say 6. If you step aside for me. Okay, just turn your hand around to me. That's perfect. That's exactly where I need it. Okay, that's good. Okay, and if you go back on again now for me. That's it. So, we're doing 12 now.
do it like that.
Okay, happy with that. Nice. Take off. Yep. Perfect. It's good. Okay. Okay, that's rolling in. Okay, do you want to step this side now for me? Okay, back on again. Okay, Patrick? Yep. That's perfect. That's good. Okay, yes, you know, back on again.
Is that 15 kilometers per hour?
Yeah. So 4-minute K test.
Okay, Patrick, you step on again for me. Okay, yeah, back on again. Nice, that's right. Okay, you can step off again. Okay, back on again. Okay, so we were at 12 the last time.
I'll say 14.
14?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that one aside. So in around 15, 16 where you expect that 14, 15, 16, that's where you expect the deck to come in, you know, when it starts getting hard, but that's your core, but we'll see where it goes. RT is always hard to,
Yeah.
it's not exact, you know, but just it's always good to record it. That's okay.
It's like I know there's some races to be fine a lot later. Not, stuff like that.
Okay, and press it back on again. Okay, top, you step off to the side. Just turn your hand around the wheel, that's it, perfect. That's good.
Still have one now, it's just done.
Just don't let go of your hands until you're on.
Okay, back on again.
I'm interested in that, what's that?
That's 4.3. Okay.
How do you feel?
Okay, I was happy I come this one, obviously. Alright. After that, this one.
Be careful getting on this one.
Okay, back on again.
Smooth.
5.8.
Okay. Makes
Up
sense,
go
so-
again. Yeah. We're still looking for 6.
Okay.
We were 16 the last time.
Probably 17.
Okay, perfect. That's good.
Maybe it takes 7.5 minutes.
Okay, please step off the side for me again. Okay, so okay, in your own time, back on again.
Yeah. 13.9. Okay.
So you want to stop it now?
Yeah. You want to get another reading?
Want to get another
See how I can go.
Okay, that's okay. So
Yeah, no,
yeah. So that's 172. One minute 49 seconds.
Okay.
So well, we can read another 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's fine.
We're up to 1675 now.
Wait a second.
What's your max heart rate been?
Like 191 is 10k. I find it hard to get to 180. almost up with lactate tolerance, so sort of wanted to know roughly where I can get it. Probably 18, 19, mostly 18. Right. Okay.
Okay, you jump onto the side.
Okay. These works now. That's the last one, okay? Just turn your hand around a wee bit for me there.
I can just give it to you there, okay?
Okay.
Just bring it down wherever you feel.
Okay.
Okay, I'll let you do that. Not bad. That's 12.9.
Okay.
But yeah. It was one.
Yeah, that's good. I think it was
0.9. That was
probably put it on
1.7.
another one or two, but I would have been absolutely flat out then, you know.
There are a couple of quick things I want to say just in case anyone is wondering about these things while watching the video. You probably won't be wondering about them, but I just wanted to let you all know what my approach was anyway. So firstly, I decided to wear a non-racing shoe. So I just wore Hoka's that I would usually wear in training, and they're a flat running shoe. By flat, I mean that they're not a super shoe and they don't have the carbon plate that super shoes have. So those super shoes are known to make you run faster, but I didn't want to wear them on the testing day because I didn't want to just go in there and for the sake of my own ego have threshold paces which are actually faster than the paces that I train at. So my intention was to get an accurate indication of what my training paces should be, and when I'm training in those ordinary shoes, that's what I should have done the testing in. So that's why I decided to do the testing in those ordinary shoes. The second thing I wanted to say was that you may have noticed there that I stopped the running at 21 kilometers per hour, and as I've said there, the reason for this was because George, the man who was doing the lab testing, just wanted me to get past 6 millimoles of lactate per litre of blood. And the idea of that is because once I was past those 6 millimoles, that was an indication that I was considerably above my LT2 pace, and we didn't need any more information than that. So the idea wasn't to get my heart rate up to the maximum it could go or my lactate as high as it could go. I kind of did want to do that in the end, but he seemed to think that I had done enough, and the most important part was to get my LT1 and LT2 paces. I didn't need to get an idea of how high my heart rate could go, although that would have been useful for the training, and I didn't need to know exactly how much lactate I could tolerate or how high I could get my lactate levels to, because the whole point of this was to just get the LT1 and particularly the LT2 paces. So that is what I did. Also, thirdly and finally, just in case anyone is wondering, I didn't get my VO2 max tested because George was telling me that that's a different type of testing, and that's something that's done preferably on a different day than the lactate testing, because the lactate testing, as you can see there, took a while. And if I were to have done my VO2 test after that, I would have been considerably fatigued. And the VO2 max test is a different type of test where it's more rapid and you move up the paces quicker, and it's very fatiguing on your body, obviously, because you're trying to get up to a pace where you're pushing yourself as hard as you can. And he said it was best to just do that on a different day. So that's why I didn't get my VO2 max score. But again, as I did say before, my VO2 max score isn't really that important for the purposes of my training because I can't do anything with that. I can, I suppose, get it in a few weeks' time and then check it again in 6 months' time to see if there's been any progress, and I can tell if my fitness has progressed in that respect. But if I had gotten my VO2 max tested at the weekend, there's nothing I can actually do with that. Whereas the LT1 and LT2 paces now, I know what paces roughly I need to be running at during my threshold runs. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now I'm going to do an analysis where I show the information that I received or the information that I think is relevant that I received on the day of the testing, and I'm going to try and interpret this. Again, my interpretation isn't necessarily correct, but it's just the way I'm interpreting the data that I received, and the idea is to do this as concisely and as succinctly as possible so that I can help you all understand what that information means for me, and also how you could go about interpreting your own data if you get this testing done yourself. Also, I just wanted to say that I hope the footage there from the actual testing was helpful to people. Why I wanted to show so much of it was because I wanted to let people know what it was actually like to go into a lab and to get your lactate testing done, because it's something that I had never done myself before, and I think I had wondered quite often what the procedure was like. So hopefully, if anyone was curious, that's helped them to see how it actually goes down on the day. Right, I think this table here that outlines my threshold paces is possibly the most useful part of the data that I've got, because it's probably the most clear. So you can see here that there's a few different columns. There's a column there that says 2 millimoles per litre. There's a column there that says 4 millimoles, a column that says 6 millimoles, another column that says LT, another column that says OBLA or OBLA, and another column that says max. So I'll talk you through what I think each of the columns mean, and I'll explain also what I'm not too sure on. But the key takeaways, as I've said at the start, were to get readings at 2 millimoles and at 4 millimoles. 2 millimoles, of course, is usually a reading for what your LT1 pace is, and 4 millimoles is usually the reading for your LT2 pace or your anaerobic threshold pace. So those were the key findings that I wanted to get out of the testing. And you can see there from the table that it says that my blood lactate was at 2 millimoles per litre at about 15.5 kilometers per hour, which was 352k pace, and that my blood lactate reading at 322k pace was 4 millimoles. So what that's telling me there is that effectively my LT1 pace is 352 per k and my LT2 pace is 322 per k. Now I'll look at a graph in a minute and explain why I think that might not be entirely accurate, which is just my opinion, but more or less I think that is fairly in line with what I was thinking and what I would have predicted my threshold paces to be. So I did say in the previous video last week that I expected my LT2 pace, which was the key one for me, to be between 315 and 325 per k pace. And if you'd put a gun to my head, I probably would have said about 320 to 323. That's probably what I would have guessed. So the fact that it's 322 per k there, or about 520 mile pace, is good to know, because it means that I've been running my paces about right, and that's good to know, just that I've been doing my training at the correct paces, and meaning that I've been getting the most out of the workouts that I've been doing. So that's great to know. The LT1 pace, 352, is a wee bit slower than I would have thought it was, but I'll explain in a minute when I look at the graphs why I think it might be a wee bit quicker. But as I have said before, that's not really that important to me, because the LT2 was something I needed to know, because I do a lot of work at that pace, at what I think is the threshold pace. So I really wanted to identify that, and I think therefore it was a productive day to be told that basically I was thinking along the right lines. You can see then that at 309k pace I registered 6 millimoles, so that obviously means that I'm working hard at that pace. The LT column, I'm not entirely sure, I'm not actually sure at all what that means. LT there you can see means lactate threshold, but I'm not exactly sure what that column is about, because it's not my LT1 pace, because that's 352 and that's where I registered 2 millimoles, so I'm not too sure. OBLA just means LT2, so you can see there that the information in the OBLA column and in the 4 millimole column is the exact same, so that's just an interchangeable term for LT2 from what I understand. OBLA stands for onset of blood lactate accumulation. Then lastly we have the max column, and as I have explained, that's not actually my true max readings, because I wasn't running to maximum capacity. That was just the maximum speed that I ran at during the day, and you can see there that the blood lactate was 12.9, so I was working hard. the heart rate was 177 and I was running at 251k pace. That's what 21 kilometers per hour is. So I hope that's insightful. Again, key takeaways are, what that table's telling me is that my LT1 pace is 352 per k, and my LT2 pace, which is the key one for me, is 322 per k, or about 520 mile pace. So that was really good to know and find out. Right, so I'm going to talk through this second table here. You can see that the speed is listed in kilometers per hour on the left hand column. Then the next column, you can see that there are times listed. These are just the times that I was running for. So of course I was running at each speed for a 3-minute interval. Then in the next column, you can see that there's the heart rate data. I'm not too interested in this information because I have been monitoring my own heart rate data over the last 6 months or so, and I roughly know what my heart rate is at particular paces already. What I am interested in is the next column, which has the lactate readings, and that is of course measured in millimoles of lactate per litre of blood. And then in the final column, we have the RPE, and as I explained before, this is just the rate of perceived exertion out of 20. So here we're going to really be looking at the speed in kilometers per hour against the lactate reading. Those are the two key elements that we're going to be analysing here. And you can see straight away that at 10 kilometers per hour, my blood lactate reading was at 3 millimoles. So that is actually quite high, and that's probably attributable to the fact that I wasn't adequately warmed up at this stage. And as I've said before, that's sometimes what can happen, in that there can be a spike in your lactate levels if you're not sufficiently warmed up, and so that's what's happened there. But that's okay, because as you can see, at 11 kilometers per hour it drops down to 1.6, then it stays at 1.6 for 12, goes down to 1.10 for 13 kilometers per hour, then at 14 it goes up a small bit to 1.4, at 15 kilometers per hour it's at 1.6, and then at 16 kilometers per hour, which is about 4-minute k pace, it goes to 2.4. So because there's that jump from 1.6 to 2.4 between 15 and 16, that's probably why my LT1 was listed as 15.5 kilometers per hour. And 15.5 kilometers per hour, as I've said, is 352 k pace, which is about 605 mile pace. But I do think if you take a look down the table, you can see that then at 17 kilometers per hour, it goes to 2.6. So that's not that much of an increase. But then at 18, it goes to 4.3. So from looking at that, I think you could argue that the first real considerable increase there is from 17 to 18, where it goes from 2.6 to 4.3. So 17 kilometers per hour is about 332 k pace, which I think is about 540 mile pace, and 18 kilometers per hour is 322 k pace, or about 520 mile pace. So part of me thinks I could read that as meaning my LT1 is somewhere between there, and that would have been perhaps more in line with where I thought my LT1 pace was. But I suppose if it was between those two, that would mean that my LT1 would be somewhere in the late 320k pace region or the early 330k pace region, and that probably is a wee bit quicker than I would have expected. But what I just mean is the first considerable spike there in lactate readings is probably from 2.6 to 4.3, because between 15 and 16 it goes from 1.6 to 2.4, so that's fair enough. But then it does stay steady at 2.4 to 2.6. So yeah, look, I think the LT1 reading was at 352. That's when I registered 2 millimoles of lactate. So I'm not going to get into too much detail about this. I think that probably is accurate enough, if I'm being honest. I'm just saying you could possibly interpret it a different way, but all in all, I wasn't really interested in my LT1 rating, to be entirely honest. It was more the LT2, and I'm going to talk about it now. So as you can see, at 18 kilometers per hour, I was registering 4.3 millimoles of lactate, and of course at 17 I was only registering 2.6. So there is a wee bit of a jump there, and of course 18 kilometers per hour is 322 k pace, and then you can see at 19 kilometers per hour it goes up to 5.8, and 19 kilometers per hour is about 310 k pace, and that's where I think you can see the first considerable jump. It's just actually after the 19 kilometers per hour, because it goes from 5.8 to 13.9 at 20 kilometers per hour, which is of course 3-minute K pace. So what I'm saying from reading that is, although my LT2 pace was measured at 322 K pace, from looking at that, it does seem that the real exponential rise in lactate readings does happen after 19 kilometers per hour, which is like 310 K pace. So to me there doesn't look like it actually happens after 322 K pace, because that's around about 18 kilometers per hour, because after 18 it only goes from 4.3 to 5.8, whereas after 19 it goes from 5.8 to 13.9. So to my mind, that's the big exponential rise. What I'm really saying is that it's arguable that from looking at that, you could dispute the fact that my LT2 pace is around about 322 per K, minutes per K, and you could say that it's perhaps a bit quicker and it's more around 19 kilometers per hour, being about 310, because it goes from 5.8 to 13.9, which is the real big significant jump or exponential rise in lactate readings. But look, really what I'm saying there is that I think when we're talking about LT2 pace, it's supposed to be a pace that you could run at for about an hour. I think if I was tapered and if I was ready to run on the same shoes that I was running at during the testing, of course, I could probably run quicker than 322 per K for an hour. So what I'm meaning is maybe my true LT2 pace is quicker than that, but I'm also not sure, and that is just the way I'm looking at this. I think 322 K pace for the purposes of my training, where obviously I want to control the levels of lactate, is about right. And the whole idea with the lactate training, with lactate threshold training, is that you stay below your lactate threshold, you don't go over it. So I'm not trying to be overly analytical here or to just talk for talk's sake. I'm just saying that's my reading of that table there. Potentially it could be said that my lactate threshold pace is a wee bit faster than it's stated, but all in all, I do think, and this might sound a bit contradictory, but I do think 322 K pace is an accurate indication of where I should be running my threshold paces at, because it means that my lactate levels are probably under control. What I also need to bear in mind is that these lactate readings were taken after running at these paces for 3 minutes. So if I ran at that pace for 10 minutes, my lactate would probably be higher. So it's probably right that I run around 322 K pace for my lactate threshold sessions, or even a bit slower. So I hope that analysis does make some sort of sense to you. One last thing I just wanted to note on this table was that you can see there that at 20 kilometers per hour, my lactate reading was 13.9 millimoles, but then at 21 kilometers per hour, it was 12.9. So it's interesting that even though I was running another 3 minutes at 8 seconds a K quicker, because I went down from 3-minute K pace to 252 K pace, it's strange that my lactate levels actually went down. And I'm not too sure whether that was because of something with the reading, in that was a bit off for whatever reason, or if it's just because I was perhaps really warmed up at that stage and I was really ready to go, and my lactate level actually just dipped a bit because of the fact that I was running at a good pace before. I really am not sure, but what I can tell you was that I really did feel comfortable running at 252 K pace. Like, I was thinking if this was a 5K at the time, this might sound stupid, but I felt like I could continue for a decent amount of time after that, like possibly could have gone on for 10 minutes or so. So I'm not sure. What that might tell me is that perhaps I should be doing a wee bit more of a fast warm-up, and that I should perhaps be using faster paces in my warm-up so that I'm adequately warmed up, and maybe that would prevent a spike in lactate. But anyway, look, I'm not too sure. I couldn't have lasted too much longer because I was pretty tired at the end. What I'm just saying is that it's interesting that there was a bit of a dip in lactate there, and what I would have liked to do is to see how high my lactate levels would have gotten to, and I'm sure they would have got higher than that if I had continued more, and I probably would have tired very quickly. But it's just an interesting takeaway. Right, so lastly, I'm going to be looking at this graph. When I say this graph, you can see that there are two graphs there, but I am just looking at the top one because that's just the one I think is most useful for me, but feel free to look at the second one too. I'm just not going to do an analysis of it because, as I've said, I think this top one is more important. And you can see that on the y-axis they have the lactate readings, and they also on the right hand side have the heart rate readings, and then on the x-axis we have the speed in kilometers per hour. And you can see on the graph that there are two lines. The top line relates to the heart rate, I think, so I'm not too interested in that. As I've said, it's the bottom line here that we're going to be looking at because that is relating to the lactate readings. So as you can see, it's just the same as what I've explained there really. The lactate reading starts off at 3 millimoles at 10 kilometers per hour, basically dips a wee bit and then stays steady until about 16 or 17, where there's a slight rise between 17 and 18. So as I've said, my LT1 is somewhere about where that first rise is, and as I've said, my LT1 was said to be at 352 kpace, so that's fine. And then from this graph you can see, again, this is what I'm talking about, the real big rise here in my mind, and that's where the LT2 is supposed to be, is where you see that exponential rise, and that happens after 19 kilometers per hour, and 19 kilometers per hour is of course 310 kpace approximately. So that's why I'm saying it's arguable that my threshold pace is perhaps a bit quicker than 322 per k. So that's just all I wanted to show. Sometimes graphs can be interesting to look at and it can give you a different perspective than a table can, but really those are the key results. Right, so that's all the footage that I have from the testing, and that's all the data that's being extrapolated and that I'm going to use for my training, and I hope that was informative for everyone. Next week coming, I am on Wednesday night actually doing a mile race in Dublin, and I'm hoping to run under 4:15, so tune in for that. I'm going to have a video before the end of this week is out on that race, and I'm going to do a bit of a race recap, so I'm looking forward to that one. Also, I just wanted to say again, a big thanks to everyone. Please keep liking the videos, please keep commenting and leaving your questions in the comment section. Please do consider subscribing if you haven't already, and feel free to follow me on Strava at Patrick Sheridan and also on Instagram at PatrickTheRunner97. But I will see you all very soon within the next week. But in the meantime, please take care. Hope you're enjoying your training and hope the videos have been helpful to you and that you're enjoying them as well. So thank you very much and take care.